So today's kind of one of those days where the term shrinkage was developed for. So
it is a bit cold outside today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my Apple Watch right now, and that thing's telling me it's -7 degrees outside. I have to imagine I know what the Jedi felt like on the planet Hoth. I don't know. You're not a big geek, right?
No, not as big of a geek as you, James.
You've seen the Star Wars, though.
I have seen the Star Wars. Maybe not all of them, but I've seen some of them.
Well, that's okay. When those, when the Rogue Leader, the one that took place in between the original trilogy and the new trilogy, when that came out,
there was another one in between all of that.
Yeah,
it was, goodness.
Yeah,
Lucas's timeline is just.
It was actually really good. It was probably one of the best movies they've done in a long time. Well, anyway, it was really dark. People died. It was actually pretty cool. So when that came out, someone's like, "Are you going to show Chelsea my wife Chelsea, the original Star Wars trilogy?" And I'm like, "I'll show her all 4 of them." Meaning, like, I'm not going to show her the original trilogy. So anyway, we should probably just do the show, huh?
Yeah.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is James and my guy,
Steve.
We're coming at you from the Iceberg, Wisconsin.
Coming in from Moonhop Studios.
The greatest studio on the planet. Like, if we get stuck here because of a snowstorm, I can think of worse places to be. We got guitars. We got music. We got a cute little dog named Carmen that's hanging out. Woof, woof. What are you flipping me off for? Steve?
No. I'm pointing to the dog.
Oh, I thought you were flipping me off. I was like, no, she's an adorable dog. I know you guys can't see her, but she's wearing like a Gryffindor sweater. So 10 points to Gryffindor for sure. So.
And she's got the cutest little brown puppy dog eyes I've seen all day.
Yeah.
God, I just wish you guys could see her, but this is a radio show.
I'm feeling targeted right now because I have brown eyes. So. All right, guys. So this episode's probably going to air shortly after Christmas. So we're recording right before Christmas. So one of the things that I want to ask is, Steve, what are you into right now?
Oh, man. I'm into a lot of different things.
Musically, of course.
Oh, musically. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This is
we don't need to get into your perversions right now.
Well, lately, I've actually kind of been revisiting some stuff. One band especially, the Specials. They're a band that, growing up, they were just kind of always around. You know, either my friends were listening to them or I was listening to them. They're, at least a weekly, if not daily, occurrence. And I
got a question for you before you get too far. How long was their tour bus?
I don't know if they ever had a tour bus. But we just lost their lead singer Terry Hall last week, and so I was talking to my wife actually about it. Just how can you forget about a band? That was such a integral part of your growing up, and I haven't listened to them, and I bet it's 15, 20 years. Other than a song here and a song there, and just listening to them, I'm like. As much as I have been this week, like you were listening, I was listening to them when you walked in the house this morning, and I was like, it's kind of like I never left them, or they never left me. They just slid right back in, and I've been listening to them at least probably once a day here for the last 5 or 6 days.
I'm a firm believer that there are just bands that get so ingrained in who you are as a person. Like, it's like that friend that you don't see him for a year, and then you see him, and it's like no time has passed whatsoever. And if you're a person out there that never has had that relationship with a band, I kind of pity you to a point.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say pity more than just feel sorry for.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, that is a great way to describe that kind of a relationship in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so. I mean, I've talked in the past, not in any of our episodes, about how much I love Kiss, and I'm going to be honest with you. Kiss, they're a shamble compared to what they used to be. They are a money grubbing business, and honestly, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley are pretty terrible people in the grand scheme of things, and they just want money, but I still love them. Yeah. I love the music, and like I could throw on any number of their albums and I'll just be like jamming the heck out and stuff like that. So me, like right now, I'm probably super into Slade. So Slade, if you don't know them, they were a British rock band. They actually wrote the song Come On Feel the Noise that Quiet Riot would become known for later. And they had another song, I want to say it's called We're All Crazy. That was another song that Quiet Riot covered. So basically, if you're a Quiet Riot fan, they probably wouldn't be nearly as popular if it wasn't for Slade. But they're just a cool group. They are really responsible for like a lot of like the grungy kind of like rock music. Like Kiss was heavily influenced by them, but they never really got popular in the U.S. So I listen to them a lot. I recently picked up Marcus King's new album called Youngblood. That's one of the albums Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys produced. Just a wonderful album. Like at times I feel like I'm going to hear like a CCR album, just kind of like that southern like bluesy kind of thing. And then there's times where he's just hitting those blues riffs left and right. It's just a solid good album. And yesterday I picked up Blink-182's Enema of the State. Pound for pound for me, that's a must own.
Yeah,
just I love that.
I actually just bought that on vinyl for my my youngest daughter Raina, probably like I don't know 4 or 5 months ago or something, and because I was like, because she's what 14. God, I don't even know how old she is. I think she's around 14, 15 years old. I think she'll be 15 next week. That's what it is.
This is the daughter that you had for a while. And I just literally never saw her because she was always in her room. Yeah. She's very active out in the world. Very busy kid, like into dance and stuff. She dances 3-4 nights a week and on the weekends and whatnot. But then when she's home, she's just like cuddles up and like reads. She's a big reader, so she's always reading on her phone, but constantly listening to music and whatnot. But I can't judge her for that. When I was like growing up, I like would just sit in my room and listen to CDs because that's what was popular. Just hours and hours and probably play with Legos a lot and stuff like that. Yeah. Just music all day, every day. So if she needs that time to recharge, like she's out giving it to the world, like dancing and doing show and stuff, and she needs some downtime, that's totally cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, it's like, and then I know where she is. I know
she's upstairs.
She's upstairs, like being safe. She's totally fine.
So Stu, what are you listening to these days?
Oh man, a record I picked up recently that I've been super into is by this guitarist named Mary Halverson.
I've not heard that name before.
I had never heard of her actually until a friend of mine, Carl King, who does a podcast, had done an interview with Trevor Dunn, who was in Mr. Bungle, if you know them.
I don't.
Really?
Oh, but you'd love Mr. Bungle, dude.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
All right,
after the show, we're going to listen to some Mr. Bungle.
Yeah,
Sounds
they're
good
wild.
To me.
But he's done a number of other like side projects with tons of people, and I just kind of went down a little rabbit hole after listening to them and saw there was this guitarist, Mary Halverson, and I was like, what else has she done? And she put out this double album called Amaryllis and Belladonna, and it's just like, I mean, ostensibly she's like a jazz guitar player, but it's like really math rocky and jazz and psychedelic, and then like half of it's kind of almost classical because she arranged a bunch of stuff for strings. So it's just a weird album, but like is really doing it for me right now.
It just speaks to you.
Yeah.
No, some of my favorite things that I've ever found was I'll be like listening to was Spotify at the time, but now like Apple Music. I'll find a band I like, and then at the bottom they always have a bunch of other bands that they're like, oh, if you like this band, check this band out. And then I will just go down this rabbit hole where I'm like 6 or 7 levels deep, and I'm just like, oh, this band's great. And Steve probably remembers like when I'd just be randomly at like 11 o'clock at night just sharing a ton of music on Facebook.
Yeah.
That's what was going on. I was laying in my bed with my headphones on just going, oh my God, this is so good. I got to remember this band and stuff like that.
It's funny. That's how I like actually learned a bunch of bands, is like reading about whoever, like, and they'd be like, well, I was really into Iggy and the Velvet Underground, and then I'd be like, well, who are those bands, and then so just reading about bands and their influences like made me want to dive deep on like who got them to where they are.
Well, yeah, because as a kid, I mean, you're always curious. Like, it's like, God, where do they come up with these ideas, and where do they get their sound from and their style and all this?
It's like, who do they love?
Yeah, and it's just like, well, yeah, let's find out who they love. And in the liner notes, they're either thanking people or they're just straight out calling them out, like, hey, check out this band, And it's like, yeah, I think that's like the one thing I love about like vinyl and the physical media, even CDs, tapes, whatever, is reading the liner notes. That's what I did as a kid. Like, I didn't read books. I read album covers and liner notes and stuff and credits.
And then I'd be at the store, and granted, I was a poor kid and I didn't have a lot of money. And then I'd see some like guitar magazine. I'd pick it up, and like there'll be an article about some band that I love, and I'd stand in that store for like 20 minutes just reading that entire article.
Oh, you were that kid dripping ice cream out of your back pocket.
Yeah, and I'd just be like, well, when I was little, it was like WWE magazines because I loved wrestling when I was a kid. But when I got older and I found music, and I'd just be like taking in every freaking thing I could find about this band and that band. And I can even tell you this, like all through paramedic school and nursing school, like there were times where I struggled to remember things. Like I had to sit and go over stuff at like a militant precision level, and it was just hard for me to memorize. But I could probably still tell you a bunch of these random facts from when I was a kid about these bands. It's just funny that your brain just knows what you love and just retains it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. I was at our local record store, the Eroding Winds, yesterday, and I was just wandering around, and I was waiting for them to price a couple trade-ins that I was bringing in, and I saw this album on the wall. It was like $100. Never heard of it. Her name was Cat Wright. So it was this woman on there, and she was absolutely beautiful, and it's kind of a retro style. She's got a bandana, and her hair kind of like almost Rosie the Riveter style.
Okay.
And it was just something about the art style that just appealed to me, and I just got really roped into it. And then the guy who works there, Seth, he was talking to me. He goes, yeah, sometimes we get these albums that come in, and they are stuff that nobody's heard of. It's like a band, and they were self-published in, and it wasn't, maybe 200 copies. And they're like, people will bring it in. They'll be like, oh, I want $300 for this. And like nobody's heard of it. I'm like, yeah, it's got to be hard to sell that because that's a niche title. So I went home, and I was doing like laundry or something, and I found her on Apple Music, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And there's just something exciting, like when you find a band on your own. Like it's always nice to tell a friend, like, hey, check this album out.
Yeah.
But when you find something amazing on your own, and it's just like, wow. And I told him, I'm like, honestly, if this is still here after Christmas, I'm probably gonna buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, so. It is great making those just random finds.
Yeah, and I'd rather buy that than go out and buy some like album that like every person who collects vinyl has this one album and it's mass produced.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you got to have those things to fill out your collection, but when you find something truly unique, it's like, wow. So anyway, again, Stu, thanks for having us come over to your studio. We always really, truly appreciate your help with our sound.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for letting me have a microphone.
Yeah, so, real talk, because we always try to be like really honest about stuff, is like, I was like, Stu, we need you to have a microphone because I want to talk to you. And I was like, you're editing our show, like you're part of the show, you should be involved.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Right, got to be inclusive. All right.
The only reason I agreed is because of his velvety smooth voice.
Yeah, it is radio.
He
radio
definitely
sexy.
has a face for radio. This guy over here.
Thank you, Steve.
I love you guys. All right, so let's hit up the news. So I checked this story out about Bob Dylan, and Bob Dylan had a bunch of things to say. So one of the things that I thought was interesting, he was talking to the Wall Street Journal, and here's a direct quote that he said about streaming services. They are too smooth and painless. And I was like, okay. So I read a little earlier on. Everything is too easy. Just one stroke of the ring finger, one little click. That's all it takes. We've dropped the coin right into the slot. It's too easy. It's too democratic. You need a solar X-ray detector just to find somebody's heart to see if they even still have one. I was like, Bob Dylan's an odd guy, but I'm like, that quote, like I felt that. I was like, yeah, it's all just there, right in your fingertip. Like some band, and granted, it's both good and bad, can just sit down in their studio, pop out one song, throw it up, and just it's right there.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think he hits it on the head. I mean, I think that's probably the most. because I've had similar thoughts, but I'm not.
It makes us sound old when we say stuff like that.
Yeah, really, right? Yeah. Well, and he's really old. He's a lot older than we are. And he probably might be as old as the two of us. Well, maybe not quite that old, but
he does look a little like a leather wallet right now.
But he is he's always, I mean, he's a wordsmith. Obviously, he's flipping Bob Dylan. I'm not a wordsmith like him. But I've had like those same kind of thoughts. Like I forget, I was talking to somebody the other day, maybe it was you, I don't remember, about just the process of flipping a record and like, kind of the commitment that it takes just to do it. You clean it and keep it safe and warm and dry and all that, kind of stuff. But just when you're playing an album, like it's a moment in time. But like when I'm playing Spotify, it's just kind of fodder in the background.
Next.
Yep. And it could be the exact same music, but like the feel that you get from it just isn't quite the same. And it is great. It's convenient, all the Spotify and Amazon, whatever.
Well, you can't put your record player in your car.
Yeah. I mean, well, they have made those. I mean, I don't know how good they are, but
I think Tesla did one, I thought, at one point or something.
Well, they used to do it back in the 50s and 60s. I'm sure it was just like when you're parking at the mountaintop with your lady, you need a little background music,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just not the same. And I think he says it very, very well, as most things he says are. But kind of interestingly enough about Dylan, just recently, and I probably knew about it, but never had really gotten into it. He, after, kind of had gotten, his fame and done a couple big world tours, he got himself involved in a project, and now I got to remember the name of it so I do it justice.
Is it those new records?
Oh gosh, I got to look it up.
But is it those new records?
No, not the new records. Nope.
Okay.
It's just an old project that he toured with, and I'm
gonna let Steve look that up, and then I'm gonna kind of mention what I was just talking about. So it wasn't that long ago that T-Bone Burnett, like a renowned producer, he had developed this new process where they took, like, I want to say it was some sort of metal, and then they took lacquer and they coated a record-shaped piece of metal with lacquer, and then they actually recorded the sound on it. It would play on like a standard record player, and Bob Dylan was one of the first people to record for that. I talked about it on a previous episode. They were called I want to say like Ionic Originals, and they supposedly were incredibly unique because you couldn't, it's not like you made a stamper and then you just kept like making the same one over and over. Each individual one was completely unique in its own right, and they went for just insane amounts of money.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah. And I want to say Bob Dylan re-recorded one of his first albums on it, like modernly, and it just, I want to say it was like $100,000 or something for that one record or something. I don't remember the exact number, but it was just insane.
So it's like a one of those deals where you like live, like the record's getting cut while it's being recorded.
Well, I don't know about that, but essentially like they're putting grooves into lacquer on a metal plate, and supposedly the sound quality was infinitely better. So this is like a record on steroids.
Oh, gotcha.
Because with it being metal and lacquer, supposedly the theory is it doesn't deteriorate as well either, and each one is supposed to be unique, almost like its own piece of artwork.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have a 7-inch or two that are not quite that caliber of production, but there's a company, I believe they're out of New York City, called Lista Vol, or Lista Ball. Like, now I can't remember. One of the two. Google it, you'll find it. But they do like one-off recordings. It's just they have like a little recording booth, and as it's recorded, like it's getting cut into a vinyl disc or some sort of plastic, disc record, and there's one recording of them all. Usually they're, depending on the artist, they're usually anywhere between $25 and $40, and you get a 7-inch. And the latest one I got is my friend Sam Birchfield just did a small run of those I don't know 8-10 months ago, and but it's great because they like you go online and you request what song you want. They're usually 4 or 5 songs that you want or that you can pick from, and you just pick the one you want, and then he records that version for you, and usually like a little message and to you. So it's just
kind of like the Cameo thing, but it's on a record.
Yep. Yeah, it's really almost exactly what it is. Yeah, it's pretty neat. So.
You find your story?
Yeah, it's so with the Bob Dylan thing. So it was from 75 to 76. He put together this little touring project called the Rolling Thunder Review.
Never heard of it.
And I'm sure I've growing up, I was a huge Dylan fan, and And I remember seeing a lot of the pictures, and because I don't know if it was every performance, but most of them, he would come out like with his face like painted white. And,
I've seen those photos.
And like usually crazy hat, and every night it was like a different feather or some weird ornate thing sticking out of his hat and whatnot.
He probably wasn't doing drugs though.
Probably not. But yeah, I don't know. I stumbled across. I don't know if I was on a YouTube video thing or what, but somehow I found out about this just recently again, and I'm like, oh god, so that's where those pictures are from, and I just kind of went down this wormhole, and that's what it was. There's a Netflix documentary on it. That's where it was, and because there's another. He's got another Netflix documentary. It's like 3 hours long that I just recently watched, and I was looking for some other. I watch a lot of music documentaries.
Netflix game has been strong with those documentaries.
Yeah. That's like probably the only reason I still carry them right now. But yeah, I went like just watching that's probably like a 2 or 2.5 hour documentary on this Rolling Thunder review. It's just amazing, and it's like. I think I want to say it was put out in like 2019 or something. So it's fairly newer, but I'm not quite up to date. But there's just a ton of more modern interviews about that time period and a ton of footage. Like I can't almost believe how much great footage that they got of some of these shows. And I want to say like this whole band was. I think there was a piano player, a keyboard player. There was at least 3 guitarists, a bass player, drummer, and maybe another percussionist.
I mean, was this the band?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even a band. It was just
he played with the band.
Yeah,
that's what they call it, like Robbie Robertson and
I haven't done enough research on it. I can't. I don't know exactly who was all in it. It might even have been a bit of a roving kind of a crowd.
Okay.
Like it might have been different, different parts of the country, might have been different sets of musicians and whatnot. I'm not even sure about that. They don't really cover like who was all in it. There's a couple people that were in the band that come on and do some interviews, but they don't really go into it.
Probably wouldn't remember.
It was they were just the Rolling Thunder review, Yeah.
That's a badass name.
Yeah. And it was just, and a lot of it was, I don't know if it was all Dylan songs, but he did definitely play a lot of Dylan songs from what I'd heard. But they were nothing like the original versions. I mean, for one, they were a rock band, not just a folk guy, which 90% of the stuff was written.
He went electric.
And, but just, completely different song structures and arrangements. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is really, 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 really awesome. And I've been scared to even try and find one of these on vinyl because I'm terrified of what the price would be. Because they have to be pretty flippin' rare. If they ever even put anything on vinyl. I don't know if they even went in.
Even if they hadn't, I have to assume that he probably would sell a bajillion copies if he did.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
There is so much Dylan bootleg material out there. I had a roommate years ago, Denny, who was like a massive Dylan fan, and he just had like, and there was this was, around, I don't know, 2002 or something, right? So it was a lot of like, people on the internet who were fans, like in the same group, like passing around the same files, but he had just a massive collection. So that's a very well documented musician.
Oh yeah.
I think guys like Dylan and like the Grateful Dead and the Beatles just have such a colossal amount of bootlegs. Just when you get to that iconic level, it's just crazy what people do.
Yeah.
So last thing I want to say about Dylan, in that same article, he went on to say that he believed the best way to listen to music was on a record player.
He's not wrong.
Yep. Not going to say I disagree with you. Side note, I do want to say that, if Jacob Dylan, his son, is listening, I would like you to make more music. I like what you do. So, all right. Kind of another oddity that was found. So lost footage from the Sega game called Michael Jackson's Scramble Training was found in the trunk of a car at a flea market in the UK. This game was a 1993 release, from what I can tell anyway. It was a motion-based game, so it's probably like an arcade cabinet. And previously, the only thing that you could find to see this on was some shaky camcorder footage from the 90s. Jackson had actually worked with Sega many times. And then actually this last June, it came out and it was confirmed that he did the entire soundtrack for Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
That's insane. I
Crazy.
never heard any involvement in his in
It sounds
video
like
games.
a Hunter Biden laptop scenario. Like they found this like tape in the trunk of a car, like a deaf man owned. Why did he have it? And,
What's this? Or it's like one of those planted things like on the Antique Roadshow. You know, it's like, what's this in your trunk? Oh my gosh, this is Michael Jackson's, blah, blah, blah. And then if anyone's listening and that's something they want to check out, apparently these were some pretty hardcore Sega fans that found this, and they actually uploaded it all on YouTube, so you can find it. So it's not just the stuff from the game; it's all of the footage that was taken in order to make the game. So there's probably stuff that was never used. Mm-hmm. So I haven't watched it yet, but it kind of is on my to-do list.
Wasn't there a Moonwalker video game? Am I making that up? There was.
He actually did a bunch of different games, and then I want to say there was this game called. It was this really iconic Sega game that was like heavily music influenced, and he actually did a performance on it. I want to say it was Jet Set Radio Future, but I don't believe it was that. It was I'm going to quote the name wrong, but he did have a lot of video game stuff he did, which was kind of cool. All right, so my last story, the Ukraine. You know, obviously it's hard not to know what's going on with the Ukraine these days. Ukraine has become the first country to select who will represent them in the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest next May. After a nearly 4-hour showdown, the electronic duo, and I'm going to butcher this, Tvorchi, it's Tvorchi, was chosen in the underground metro station beneath Kiev, that's the capital of Ukraine. This site's been used as a bomb shelter since the early days of the Russian invasion. So one thing I want to say about that is how freaking cool is that? This country is just getting bombed and wrecked and essentially tortured by a major power, and music is still alive there.
Yeah, it says a whole lot about the people of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's intense. So Steve said earlier he doesn't actually know a whole lot about the Eurovision Song Contest.
No, I don't.
I admittedly haven't. I don't know a ton. I know ABBA's origin is heavily influenced by the Eurovision.
They were part of that,
like the first couple of them. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, there's this whole rabbit hole we could go down with that too, where ABBA, and if you want to check it out, there's this like a show called This Is Pop on Netflix. There's an episode where they talk about ABBA and they relate it through a very clear path to all of those 90s like boy bands like the Backstreet Boys and stuff like that, and Britney Spears. And what you actually come to realize is that all these Swedish producers that came out of this one house in Sweden that worked with ABBA are creating all of these popular hits in LA still.
That's amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, man. Those Swedes, like, they figured out the recipe, man, and they just, like, they don't tell anybody the recipe. They just keep churning out cupcakes like a
ABBA
factory.
is still so much better than all of those other bands you mentioned.
Oh, absolutely.
Groups. Bands.
So Eurovision, it's like all of Europe, right? That does this.
Yeah, and beyond, actually. This is the first year that America is going to be participating, which, I mean, they've also had, like, in the past, Israel and Australia, so...
it's not just the continent of Europe.
No, maybe every place that was ever, like, touched by the British Empire is now.
That's a good way to put it.
Eventually going to be
Touched in a good way?
Yeah, touched.
Well, depends on who you ask.
Yeah, but yeah. So keep going.
So really, Steve, if I had to explain this to you, I mean, it's kind of almost like a international American Idol, where they have all of these artists and they put songs forward, they perform live, and then everybody votes on what's best. So it's kind of like the world championship of pop music, essentially.
And it's wild because it's so over the top. If you watch some of these, James,
not recently, but okay. I've seen like one or two. You can certainly tell me anything about it because you're far more of an expert on this than I am.
I mean, is this open to like currently like major pop artists like that are recording now, or is it kind of like an up and coming?
So some of them are maybe popular in their countries or have become popular because of the contest. I mean, you would watch this and like probably 90% of what you're watching, you'd be like, oh my God, I can't stand this. But like, I mean, like,
yeah, it's pop music.
Yeah,
it's very pop music.
Not a huge pop
like,
fan.
And
it's no
it is,
secret.
it is like sort of the fun of it though, is like, you know, the elaborate costumes and choreographed routines and
Will Ferrell had a movie where
he did.
Yeah.
Oh, it was terrific.
It was hilarious.
Well,
I
kinda
saw
long,
that.
actually, but it was
So
pretty
that's
funny.
basically what it is, like a spoof, obviously, because it's a Will Ferrell movie. But yeah, it was him and like was it his sister or
Yeah,
no, it was a girlfriend.
And then at one point, like he's getting in a car with some Americans, and he's like, "Old Town Road, Old Town Road."
Yeah. So a lot of the there were a ton of cameos in that movie of actual Eurovision winners and contestants from previous years. But there's some legit cool bands, and my wife would remember them better because she's actually been listening to several of them. But there's this guy, Dottie, I think that's Dottie Fryer, who just does like these really cool. I mean, it's dance music, but like it's funny. He's just got like a great sense of humor about it. He's got these really funny videos. Anyway, he'd be worth checking out and maybe talking about another
He's
time.
not that guy that does he's always like him in a bathrobe and he's just rocking out on his little beatbox machine thing.
No.
Oh, I know.
Wake up.
I know who
You know
you're
what I'm talking
talking about. Like he does random weird covers.
Yeah.
Like I remember it was like him and some girl, and they were doing like Poison covers or something. Like I remember it was. You have to look that up because I don't remember it. It was like a random thing I saw on Facebook.
Different guy.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
No, that was Stu on the weekends.
Yeah.
So Eurovision. I mean, it's a spectacle. It's huge. It's important to a lot of these countries, and a lot of people get attention that wouldn't normally get attention on an international level. So, but Stu was right. Like it's elaborate. Like these costumes are insane. It's not just like, hey, here's my song. It's like you got to hustle.
Yeah.
To get this.
Well, yeah. I mean, like if it's anything like that Will Ferrell movie. And what was the name of that movie? Do you remember?
I don't.
So
that's
at least all of us don't know what we're talking about.
Our dad memories kicking in. Oh, that one guy.
But if it's anything like that, and I understand that's a total spoof, but if it's anything like that, that makes total sense because Europeans are crazy, man. Like they get into things like just way over the top. I mean, most bands that have come out of there have been like very showboaty and whatnot. And there's some of that in America, but I don't know. America's talent is. I mean, there's some great
talent, man.
But like, it's in a sense, it's kind of watered down. Like we've gotten away from that like showy stage.
Here, man. You're,
a little
I don't know, you're like,
bit, yeah.
If
calling
you hear,
some people out.
If you hear the mics tip over, we're all getting in a fight.
But and there are like I've noticed there are some bands like it seems like some of that showmanship in a sense might be making kind of a bit of a comeback. Like. Your new Mile of Music, Jossie. I never want to murder that name.
I'm happy he's coming back to Appleton very soon.
But like just bands like that and a couple other bands that I've seen open for other bigger bands, they kind of come out and they have they actually like worry about like, hey, let's coordinate our costumes. Even little things like that is like you used to just be like, yeah, we're this band like you say like here's our song, take it or leave it.
Hi, we were born to rock.
Yeah,
but there have always been bands doing. I mean, like Madonna,
not like in Europe.
Madonna always did that kind of stuff. I mean, it's probably a lot of music that we were not necessarily
true.
Didn't care
I don't
that much
get into
about.
that
We weren't
pop
going
world.
to those shows,
Yeah.
but I mean, I feel like those big production spectacle acts have continued to be around. It's just. I mostly just want to see Alice Cooper do it, and not.
Yeah,
Alice Cooper knows how to put on a show. You know who else put on a good show, Steve? Glam rock.
Keep calling me out on my love-hate relationship with glam rock.
Right. All right. Well, that's all I got for news, Steve. Let's check in with what you got prepared.
All right. So I mentioned a little earlier, that the music world lost Terry Hall, lead singer from the UK band The Specials. This band started 77, 78, and they went. I just learned this actually. They went by the Coventry Automatics. They were from Coventry, UK.
That's a great name too.
Yeah, and somehow I don't know the story, but somehow it turned into The Specials. And that was like I think in 79 when they recorded their first album as that. So Terry Hall, 63, died on December 18th.
That's young.
Yeah, from an unspecified illness, according to bandmates. Hall was best known as the lead singer for the late 70s ska band The Specials, hailing from Coventry, UK. The band states, "It is with great sadness that we announce the passing, following a brief illness, of Terry, our beautiful friend, brother, and one of the most brilliant singers, songwriters, and lyricists this country has ever produced. Terry was a wonderful husband and father, and one of the kindest, funniest, and most genuine of souls. His music and performances encapsulated the very essence of life: the joy, the pain, the humor, the fight for justice, but mostly love." And just doing, some quick research on this guy. One of his they mentioned, and love, and that was like a kind of a big tone that I got in just reading different articles on his passing, and just articles about him and whatnot. I mean, this guy was one of he was a lyricist and like a big just activist in a time in UK when there was just a lot of social injustices and a lot of racial injustices going on. And he was one of those guys that just wasn't afraid to speak about it. And his whole idealism, I guess, behind it was just like, we need to find the love. And it's from some of the reports I read, it sounds like a lot of times when he ended shows, he would end it with just 3 words: love, love, love. And that's kind of how he would like make his exit off the stage. And just like I had mentioned before, I've been listening to him, this past week a lot again. And I kind of, when I first started listening to them, I was a little punk kid, and everything was angsty, and
now
it's
you're
like
a punk old man.
Yeah, now I'm just an old punk. But I have a different perspective on the world, and especially with a lot of changes that have been going on just politically and in our American culture. I mean, it's a virtual shit show in a lot of ways.
I agree with.
And not to go down a deep dark hole.
So let's talk about politics next.
Yeah. But so it's neat to like have been kind of removed from those songs and those lyrics, and then like be reintroduced to them in our current political state and
in some ways they're more relevant now than they were.
Exactly. Yeah, more relevant to me because a lot of these songs are about the injustices that were going on over the pond, and like in a way it's like I could kind of see some of that because we still had a lot of that crap going on. I mean, that stuff's been going on in societies since societies began, basically. And they're just, they ebb and flow, and sometimes things are a little bit more copacetic, and sometimes things are really heated. And right now we're living in a more heated time, I'll say. But yeah, just to hear some of those lyrics and like really like, wow, they like kind of punch you in the gut again in a great way. Like, oh,
make
wow,
you feel something.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh man, like there are people that understand, and these lyrics were written in the late 70s, and I was 4 and 5 when a lot of this stuff was being written, and to have that impact now at 47 is just like that's pretty neat. Yeah, so Terry Hall, R.I.P. man. I'm sure we'll catch up in rock and roll heaven.
There's going to be some good shows going on there.
Yeah, right.
What were you going to say, Stu?
Oh, I was just going to say, I listened to their first album again the other day, and I really only knew the first 2 albums. I mean, they did like the specials and more specials, and then I know they made some more later.
Yeah, in 2019, I think they recorded some stuff, and
they did an excellent cover of Pressure Drop that was in the movie Grosse Pointe Blank. If you guys,
I actually love that movie so
one
much.
One of my favorites. So,
like if I was gonna make a movie where someone played me, it would be a young John Cusack,
right? I mean, dead
that
ringer,
would work.
Dead ringer. So, but one of the things that struck me listening to that album again was also like there's this element of danger in all of the lyrics, right? Where in the concrete jungle and in the nightclub and the sort of the fractious groups, all you punks and all you Teds and skinheads like fight each other till you're dead, and this feeling
that sounds a little intense.
It
right.
is.
Well, I think
totally.
it was for them. They sort of felt like because everyone's in their own little like subculture there, and like and they all wanted to get in fights, mods versus punks, and and skinheads out there. And,
let's be clear, I would be a mod.
would you? Yeah, I don't know. And then they came in with like this a fairly unique sound at the time, and they had this mixed race group that I think was pretty unusual.
Oh,
and,
yeah, that was like...
I mean, if that was the 70s and they were mixed in England.
Yeah.
That was
a big... that was like a big
sure, the two-tone
thing back then. A two-tone band. I mean, you couldn't get away with calling a band two-toned these days. Like, holy... I kind of feel weird talking about it being them. Yeah, a little bit.
Interesting, Steve. Yeah. Let's discuss this more later.
Let's talk about your racial issues, Steve.
Tell me about your parents.
No, I just
were you a happy child?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Say the specials.
Yeah, right.
You took out all your feelings on them when you put them on the record.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know much about the specials, but certainly make Terry sound like he was a intense, thoughtful poet in many ways. So I don't know if any of his family's ever going to hear this, but if they are, our condolences to you, because it sounds like that was truly a real loss.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so the segment that I wanted to talk about, so for a while now, I've been going down this like rabbit hole with Detroit. So obviously, like Detroit's like, and I hate to say this, Detroit's kind of like a dumpster fire in a lot of ways. Like their economy's been on the decline since the 60s. There's parts of town where they don't have power or water. Like if a house starts on fire, a lot of times in certain areas,
they just let it burn because it's cheaper.
Just let it burn. And like trash doesn't show up. And if you go back and you like look at the musical history of Detroit, I mean, you're talking about soul music, rock music, and probably their last really great era, like the early 2000s, like in late 90s when like the White Stripes were coming up there. Like they got a rich musical history. That's not even to mention like the rap, like Eminem and Kid Rock. Like Detroit was an intense place for music for many, many years. So I've been working on doing a couple of little segments about Detroit related stories. And I have one, it's kind of like the fall of Motown. That one I've actually had prepped for a while, but I wanted to do this one because Steve here loves punk music. Mm-hmm. So this band that I want to talk about is probably, in my mind, the greatest American punk band. And I don't know if you're going to agree with me on that, but that's just how I feel. So the band I want to talk about is the American rock group, the MC5, or as some people call them, the Motor City 5.
Kicking out the jams.
So these guys formed in Lincoln Park, Michigan in 1963. So you think about that, that's kind of like the peace, love era.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not relevant right this second, but when you kind of hear a little bit about this band, you're going to be like, oh, wow. VH1 listed them at one point as one of the most important rock acts of their era. A rock writer by the name of Robert Bixby described the band as a catastrophic force of nature the band was barely able to control. I don't know. To me, if I didn't know this band, I'd be like, I got to hear these guys.
Oh, totally.
The mid-'60s were a turbulent time in Detroit. This was really reflective in their sound. Like, you can hear a lot of their turbulence. Their live shows were loud, energetic. It was kind of like a hodgepodge of garage rock, hard rock, blues rock with a little bit of psychedelic flavor. These guys definitely did drugs. I'm talking about marijuana, LSD, all kinds of stuff like that. It wasn't their mind-bending assault on your ears that elevated them to the level of punk rock royalty. The band was actually really super into the counterculture scene, which when you think about hard rock bands, that's not a common thing.
True. Yeah.
You think maybe the 60s and stuff like that, you can think of a bunch of like the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones were mildly involved in the counterculture. They had their long hair and stuff.
Well, I mean, the whole hippie thing was counterculture to begin with.
Right. And generally that was a peaceful thing. But it's not something you think about when you think of a hard rock band.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically when I think of hard rock bands and, rock bands, I just think about every little boy's dream to be on MTV or, to be up on stage and getting all the ladies, like that
Yeah.
kind of a feeling.
Yeah, I'm gonna
like,
be honest.
I don't
When I think about hard
like,
rock bands, I think about getting laid.
What?
yeah, yeah. Like I just want to like tour the country and just have fun and like just get away from the establishment maybe rather than like really sing out against it. Where I think like more of the like that punk movement was very much like in your face. I'm gonna bitch about the things I don't like.
Damn the man.
Damn the man. Yeah.
Well, and I think like the there was a lot of peace and love revolution talk happening at that time, but like the MC5,
like
which you're going to talk about,
sexual
like,
freedoms and things like that.
Well, and their manager famously, I think his name was John Sinclair. You're probably going to get
actually
into all that.
That's actually my next part to
Okay.
talk about.
I won't say anything.
No, go ahead.
But these guys, right, the MC5, like they were about a much more in your face kind of revolution, right? I believe didn't they start the White Panther Party?
Yep. Yeah. Here, I'll go into
shut
that.
up because you're probably doing all this.
No,
like
you're
this.
good.
Yeah.
So their manager that Stu was talking about, John Sinclair. So first of all, he did not like to be called a manager.
Okay.
So that's how like anti-establishment this guy. He was an American poet, a writer, and a political activist. Like there are like John Sinclair like foundations and things like this. This guy made a footprint in that area. While working with the band, he actually, like Stu was saying, helped found the White Panthers. This was a group of white activists dedicated to helping the Black Panthers with their agenda. His organization called Trans Love Energies was essentially like a commune housing with White Panthers and musicians. Now think about that name for a second. Trans Love Energies. Totally would have a different connotation these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these guys performed as part of like Vietnam protests. They actually played outside the 1968 Democratic National Convention, which ended up getting broken up because it became
massive riot. I actually had a neighbor who was there. He was like 16 years old at the time, or maybe even younger. He was a wild kind of revolutionary dude. But yeah,
I mean, if I had the ability to time travel, stuff like this I would go see. I'd be like,
I would get your head knocked in by the cops. But
yeah, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go stand over here on the side of the street and just watch everything unfold.
Yeah.
Steve would be like, no, I'm gonna go right up front.
Yeah, I'm getting in the pit.
and that was how Steve invented the mosh pit. All right, so these guys actually did a lot of other odd things too. So like they would bring out like unloaded guns onto stage. They would burn American flags on stage. At one point, their lead singer actually got shot by a sniper during the show.
Whoa.
I hadn't heard that. That's insane.
That's kind of
I actually hadn't heard that either.
Yeah.
Wild.
His last name's Tieran. I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. So like these guys like would throw it out. Like, I don't know about you, but because you're a big punk guy. I'm not. I'm like, everything I'm hearing, I'm like, these guys are punk.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think they're considered one of the proto-punk bands. Right?
Yeah, they're
like,
pre.
Along with the Stooges, also from Detroit.
Yeah.
And
yeah, Detroit loves them some like.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, the disparity that's going on in Detroit with their economy and whatnot, and I think Detroit's always been kind of a rough city, so to speak, even in its heyday. And I think that's why a lot of that great music comes out of that, because some of the best music comes out of strife. Like you mentioned, like we kind of have this little theme going about like protest music and whatnot, like just like with Ukraine, what's going on, in that thing. We kind of cut off that conversation, but just that, with that competition happening in like the city's bomb shelter during a war, and they're still doing that. Think about all those awesome protest songs that are going to come out of this time in Ukraine. And it sucks that it kind of has to be that way, but like, I guess when you take the good with the bad, at least we get some great music out of it.
But you got to imagine that, any place that's in that kind of situation, music is one of those things that binds people and a culture together. And like, it's necessary for the nourishment of the human spirit, right? And like when people like that, when you're being bombed like that, that's one of those things that it like makes life worth living is having music. So in some ways, like
and art in general, I mean, even painting and sculpture, whatever.
You take those things away from someone, or even threaten to take those things away, people get angry.
Well, and I mean that's why, like in the concentration camps, like in World War II, like the Germans were like no singing, right? Because that's something that lifts the human spirit. So like that was verboten, right? So I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying it's awesome, like, you know, to know that about, and like it's exciting to see it happen still, you know. It's a reminder.
Music and art, I don't know about you guys, makes me feel alive.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people, and the people, like, I've said this to not necessarily on the show, but in a lot of conversations, it's like there are people, like here's a good example, Mile of Music. We're getting off subject here, but Mile of Music is our local festival. We've talked about it in other shows. When you go down to Mile of Music, obviously drinking is a big part of our culture. There's essentially 3 different types of people that go to those shows. There's the people that are there for the music. There's the people that are there who they're like, hey, I just want to listen to music in the background. Then there's people that go there just to drink.
Yeah.
Like they use it as an excuse to drink.
I feel like there's a Venn diagram of drinking and there to listen to music, and like Steve is right in the middle.
Steve's definitely in the middle.
Actually, one of the reasons I love Mile of Music so much, more than any other music festival I've been to, because I'm not a huge crowd guy when it comes to music festivals. And most of the music festivals I've been to, there's like 3 huge stages all in some parking lot, and you kind of got to bop around and go just through a sea of people standing there. I'm like, that's just not enjoyable. And it's, you know, it's hard to get up front to see a band because there's, you know, some people will just plant by a stage, and I'm just going to watch,
sit there all day.
And I'm like, I'm going to go to the band I want to see, type of a thing. So it's hard to get up and close and front with it, and that's why I love Mile of Music and South by Southwest. I've been there, and it's kind of the same, you know, almost the same format really as Mile of Music, where it's just every small little venue in the town gets involved, and there's just almost 1,000 sets in small little clubs and coffee shops, and on the bus, you know, they literally have, these guys have a Mile of Music bus where they get artists to come on and do little acoustic performances while they're carting people around the town for free. And it's just everything, the entire town turns into a music festival.
It's like a mini Nashville.
Yeah, and it almost exactly, yeah. And it's but it's all original music. Like there's 0 covers. It's only people's art, and that's their own art. It's not, you know, how many Billy Cyrus covers can you do, or, you know, Brooks and Dunn songs.
Definitely heard a few of those when I was in Nashville.
You know, and it's you know, it's you know, 4.5 days really of live art. And
this last one was the first one that I went to the entire thing, and I just want to say, like, just to give you an idea about like the perspective of it. So Steve and I both really like music a lot, and Steve and I are obviously super good friends. So we both sat down with our apps, because you can pick, like listen to bands and make like your own schedule of the bands. And Steve and I like different types of music. Sometimes we do like some of the same stuff. So it's like we would just be texting, and Steve would be like, I'm going to go here. And I'm like, I'm going to go here. We'd meet up for an hour performance for someone. And then it was like, oh, I'm going to go over here. And I'm like, well, I really want to see this guy. And it wasn't like, well, why are you going to go see them? But you want to hang out with me? No, it was just like, hey, I'm going to go follow the music that I love. You're going to go follow the music that you love. And nobody cared. It was just like, It was like, hey, good seeing you. Maybe I'll run into you later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the neat thing I like about that app and the way they run their scheduling is you can make it as personal as you want it to. And it's, you know, you can, like, I'm the type of person, I'm probably not going to follow a group. Like, I have some friends, and they just kind of group up for the week, and they pretty much hang out together all the time, and I pop in with that group, and I follow them to a couple of different things, but like, you know, I just have, you know, some different music tastes, and so I like basically I follow my schedule, and anybody I run into is great. And luckily I know enough people around town where pretty much every show I go to I'm going to know somebody, so it's like I'm hanging out with all my friends, just not all together, and it's just great how that can be like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I even hung out with Stu this year.
MC5.
So you know, that was a little bit of a sidetrack.
That was a weird segue, man. So I like it.
Going back to the MC5. So one of the things that I absolutely wanted to tell Steve about. So it kind of circles around the creation of their first album, that they got actually pretty big national attention. Kick Out the Jams was recorded live October 30th and 31st. So again, live, first album, in the Detroit Grand Ballroom. It would soon get that national attention. And why is that? Because the album contains a lot of classics, one of which is the album's title track. It also had a song by John Lee Hooker called The Motor City is Burning. During that song, you can actually hear the lead singer praising the Black Panthers for the 1967 Detroit riots and their role in it. So the controversy actually opened up about the song Kick Out the Jams. So the lead singer literally calls out, "Kick out the jams, motherfuckers." Like, that's how he plays the song. And in the liner notes of the album, it had that as well. So enter Hudson's Department Store. They were a pretty big staple in Detroit in the 60s, 70s. I don't know when they went out of business, but they were in the metro area. They refused to stock the MC5's album because of that. And then what do you think the band did about that?
Oh, they called him out on it.
So they decided to double down on that. They took out a full-page ad in the local underground music called The Fifth Estate, featuring a shot of the band playing live. And it read, "Kick out the jams, motherfuckers, and kick the door in if the store won't sell the album on Elektra. Fuck Hudson's." So this kind of caused a little bit of a stir.
Just a little bit.
So Hudson's was like, okay, we're not happy about that. Elektra had no idea that they were going to do this. So then all of a sudden Hudson's like, hey, we're not going to stock any Elektra albums. So then Elektra's like, we're not going to have the MC5 anymore. But don't feel bad for them. They ultimately would end up signing with one of the other big labels, and they were just fine. I think they only put out, I want to say, like 3 albums.
I think that's right, yeah.
But they were awesome. And that album was one of the, I'd say probably like the first 50 albums I bought.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a absolute classic.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever owned an MC5 album. Maybe I might have a 7-inch.
Yeah.
Maybe, but I had some friends that were fairly big into them back in the day, so I had some exposure, but I, just at the time when I found them, I was, because they didn't really have like a punk sound at all.
I mean, at times they'd have moments like a guitar riff would sound kind of punkish, or the beat or something.
Yeah. Like I was listening to them a little bit just this morning, just to kind of freshen up for this segment, and I was just like one of the big things I noticed was like probably like the most similar thing to a punk sound that I could really pull out of them was the simplicity of their guitar solos. I was like, oh, those are total punk rock guitar solos. Like, because you do any little like quick internet read on them, and they're that everybody's claiming, oh, these are the reasons that the Sex Pistols started, and all these other bands.
I don't know about that. I'd make the argument that the Kinks were probably one of the first truly punk bands.
But it's like obviously these guys were influenced on a lot of punk bands, and even
absolutely.
Punk bands that came about 20 years later, in the 80s and 90s.
But the cool thing is, though, they were probably the godfathers of like American punk.
Yeah. I think that's a fairly safe assessment. But yeah, like I'd have
said the Stooges, but we can discuss that later.
Well, actually, an article that
it takes two to make a couple.
Yeah, right,
the article I read actually said the MC5 were almost like mentors to the Stooges. Like, they would see them at shows and things like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we're going to name our new band, but we're going to spell it STEW.
The Stooges, yeah.
Stooges.
Love it.
Hey, I'll come. I'll come see you guys. I'll throw my underwear on stage or whatever you guys want. If I'm wearing any.
Is that before or after you come? Sorry.
Definitely after. All right, so that's honestly all that I had prepared for the show here. So either you guys got anything you wanted to throw out at anybody?
Something you mentioned about Detroit right now and the state of it, and you mentioned garbage not being picked up, and that just jogged in my head that's the situation that was happening in England when that first punk movement happened with the Sex Pistols and the Clash. I mean, there'd been a garbage strike there that had gone on for years, and that was like the environment they were coming from. The streets are just like piled high with garbage, and this, that whole like sort of no future. That was the world,
Yeah,
Johnny Rotten was seeing around him and things like that, and they were writing about. And I don't know. So, it's possible we're going to see maybe a renaissance musically from Detroit.
I would love that. Honestly, like I'd have to do some research, but I would go to Detroit because I have a feeling that there's probably still some royally like underground bands that are probably still in Detroit that nobody.
I'm sure.
That
I feel like
knows
I've
about.
read something recently about bands coming out of there that are, and I think they're very sort of, I don't know, protective or something, or maybe not, maybe just proud of their identity as like, this is Detroit music.
Oh yeah, Detroit's
yeah.
a lifestyle beyond a
Yeah.
shadow of a doubt. Like you watch any of the travel shows and stuff like that, like they are hardcore about their city, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. One of the last bands that I really got into, so Jack White from the White Stripes will do these like they're like crates, like he has a subscription service because he has Third Man Records. So it's like you pay, I can't remember, I think it's like $80 for like 3 months, and you'll get this box, and it's essentially going to be an album that he made for this. That's going to be either like a rare performance. It's going to be an alternate version of something. It's going to come with extra stuff, like demos, really deluxe stuff. One of the things that I found, I didn't subscribe to it, but I was able to track this down, was a band called The Go, which were contemporaries of the White Stripes at the time. Never heard of them. I got one of their albums that came out in 1999. It was absolutely freaking amazing, and I just love it.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, they're cool. Like you can tell it's like a late 90s, early 2000s band, but they're just wonderful.
I haven't heard it, but I've been hearing lots of good stuff about Jack White's most recent album. Have you listened to it?
I have his last, because he put out 2 albums last year.
Maybe that's-
One's called Entering Heaven Alive, and then there's the other one, and I'm blanking on what
I want to
it's
say Fear of the Dark, but that's an Iron Maiden album, but I feel like it's got a similar title.
something Dawn.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both of them are great. The first one, like it, they're on different ends of the spectrum. One of them's kind of heavy, and the other one's very like light and acoustic, and it's intense. It's cloudy. It's probably like musically one of his most saturated albums ever listened to. And the first time I like put it on, I was listening to it, and I'm like, this is a bit much for me.
Yeah.
Like it was a little intense to listen to, but the more I listened to it, it grew on me. And funny thing about that, so when we were in Nashville over the summer, we went to RCA Studio. I want to say it's 50. We're so bad about remembering names on the show. RCA Studio 52 is like one of the places where like Porter Wagner, Elvis, all kinds of famous people like recorded. Like the bulk of Elvis's truly great stuff was recorded in this studio. They still have an X on the floor because he had a preferred spot he'd like to stand on. They had the same color. They had like red, green, and I want to say it was blue colored lights. And depending on what he was playing, the lights would be lit up. And like they were just telling all these stories. And at one point the guy goes, "Oh, Jack White was here last week." And I'm like, "Really?" They're like, "Oh yeah, last week he recorded a music video here." So when I got home, or actually I think it was that night in the hotel room, I found the music video. Jack White and his band are freaking standing right where I was standing,
Great.
just playing in a music video. And I was just like, it was so meta, and it was just like, wow, just intense.
Yeah, it's great that they still allow that space. Sometimes, some of those studios like that, some big artists are in, it's like they enshrine them and they like, nobody can ever use this again.
I stood in the spot where Elvis would play. I touched the piano that he played that he tried to buy from them, and they told them, they're like, "No, we're not going to sell this to you because we want you to keep coming back." So Nashville, and I talked about this on a previous episode, Nashville is probably one of the coolest places I've ever been. But you gotta not like get roped up in the tourist stuff.
Yeah.
Like you go see the Ryman, the country. Like there's like the music. There's like a music hall of fame there, but it's not like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's like the Songwriters Hall of Fame or something like that.
There's a couple of them. I think there's the Songwriters. There's also just the Country Music Hall of Fame is there.
Yeah, you go on those historic sites and you see some of those like places like Music Row. Those are cool. But like you go to the Grand Ole Opry and it's like what you'd expect. It's like, oh, here's the Disneyland of country music.
Yeah, it's very modern and whatnot. It's still a cool experience. I was able to go down and check out a Tuesday night Opry show, and I actually got to see Porter Wagner. Little Jimmy Dickens played.
Oh, cool.
Gosh, I forget.
I got to see
the Statler brothers played.
That's
like
nice.
They're not even members, but they were just like the guests that week. So I got to see them sing Elvira and all that.
You got to see the plaques where they would go. They have like mail slots there for those musicians.
Oh, really?
It's weird. My favorite thing about the Country Music Hall of Fame was the Grand Ole Opry. I mean, I got to see the stage where most of Hee Haw was filmed.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
I just remember my grandparents watching it.
Yeah, Hee Haw was a great. I grew up on that. Like Hee Haw was a huge influence on my like
your sense of humor.
My sense of humor. Yeah, it's very comedic show. If you've never seen it, go check out some YouTube clips of it. It's hilarious, and they had some of the best like old school country duets and performances on that show, because all the big guys, like that was how you got yourself out there, is what you did every radio TV spot you could possibly do, and Hee Haw was like. That was like one of the biggest formats. I mean, it was in everybody's living room just about on either Saturday or Sunday nights whenever it aired, and it was just a great format.
It's funny. My main recollection of it is that the church that we went to, like when I was like until I was like 5 years old, First Baptist Church, they would do like a fundraiser or something, and they would do like a version of Hee Haw. Like they did it a couple of times, and like so I remember like my memory is my mom like blacking out one of her teeth, like with makeup, because that was part of the show, and I don't really remember anything beyond that. But
there's probably hay bales involved. I imagine.
Yeah, I mean like they wearing overalls and like I mean it was cute, but I was probably like 4 years old, so like, my memories are real hazy. I don't remember any of the good jokes.
So please stay tuned for our follow-up episode where it's going to be 1 hour of Hee Haw talk. So. All right, guys, we're ready to wrap her up. What do you think?
I think that sounds good. Yeah, we got to get to doing. It's still not Christmas in our time right now. I know when you guys hear this, it'll be Christmas past, so to speak.
Yeah, and Steve and I got to go chip the ice off of my car, and I got to go home, and my kid's home from school today, hanging out with Steve's kids, so we can do this episode and all of that jazz. So a couple other things. Make sure you follow us on Facebook. If you want to click on the main page, there's an email where you can shoot us a message. Tell us what you're listening to. Hey, if you want to send us pictures of your record room, we'd love to post that for you.
Show us what you got. Show us some of your favorite records, maybe your record player. What kind of players you guys are using these days?
Are you guys going to show yours too? I mean, it's like show me.
Oh, I've talked about
mine.
I've talked about mine.
I'll show you yours if you show. I'll show you yours if I can show you mine.
Maybe on that episode we'll get an argument again about direct drive versus belt-driven turntables. Steve and I have very different opinions on that. So like I said, check us out on Facebook. And
Instagram. I'm gonna start an Instagram page here before this episode airs. So make sure you check out the Instagram.
So make sure you check us out on the Insta, as the kids say. So Steve will
IG.
Steve will show us all of his colored vinyls. Right? Isn't that what kids call records? Vinyls.
Yeah, vinyls.
It's so weird. I feel like such an old man, but I get a little ticked off every time I read that. Like kids are like, "Oh, I got new vinyls today."
If you've ever watched like the YouTube videos where they do like unboxings and stuff like that, and some of these like people, I'm just like, they're young. You need to not judge them.
No, I shouldn't say I get ticked off. Like it's just sounds awkward to me. I guess that's all it is. Like it always sounds awkward to me to like call them vinyls.
Yeah,
it's like I have a vinyl collection that is made up of records.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But there's people who like get caught up and. Just occurred to me as we're doing like that rock show thing where we're like, hey, this is the end, and then we keep talking and we do another encore.
The Midwest goodbye, right?
It's the Midwest goodbye. Midwest goodbye. But what I was going to say was, so like people get picky about what you call your record player. Oh, it's a turntable. It's a record player. It's like, does it matter? You got this thing here that plays records.
So are the new kids calling it like the vinyls contraption or something? Is there some new...
My vinyl player?
Yeah,
my vinyl player.
No, it's okay. It's probably their little suitcase Crosleys.
They probably just want to distinguish themselves from old dudes like us. They're like,
oh, absolutely.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, then they go home and they just throw their records flat on the table while they're listening to it.
and then turn on Spotify.
They turn on Spotify.
Actually, I just was speaking of the little turntable in a box. My oldest kid, Sid, was, hey, I want to buy a record player, blah, 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 blah. And she started showing me something. It's in a box. It's out. Like, you're not buying a suitcase record player.
Right. And
it's just not going to happen.
And again, let's just kind of say this again because we're not turntable shaming anybody. If you only thing you can afford is one of those, like, record players in a little box, that's cool. We'd rather have you play it.
Well, I'm gonna confess now because this is airing after Christmas, right?
It was.
Okay, so we bought my oldest nephew a turntable for Christmas, and it's one that he asked for on Amazon, and it is similar to the kind that you're describing, and it actually can stream Bluetooth as well through the same built-in
it's probably
speaker.
a Crosley or a Victrola or one of those.
I don't even remember, but it's what he wanted. And for a minute, I was like, no. Like, he needs a hi-fi system. And
let's get you this Audio Technica.
And then I was like, and then I talked to my brother after I got it and he was like, I went through the same thing. And he's like, you know what? Like, let's just get him what he asked for. See how into it he is. Like, our first record players when I was a little kid were like that. I mean,
I had a suitcase one.
Yeah, I mean,
and it had like almost like a stone platter too. It was weird. I remember it was like leather. It was like my grandma's or something.
Yeah.
And mostly I listened to like these 7-inch Gremlins story.
Oh, yeah.
I bought those. I have a complete set of them.
Nice.
I've got a Return of the Jedi story. It's like a picture disc. My brother and I wore that thing out. I mean, it like skips and like repeats. Like
I can just hear that grind of that thing.
How many times have you had to tape a quarter to the head of your needle to like push through the skips?
Oh, we didn't. It was just like when it would. We always knew where it was going to skip, and then we just walk up and like bang the record player, like which it gets more scratches.
I wonder why that thing skips so much.
Oh man, like there are just like I have huge like amounts of lines from that movie memorized just from listening to the record. It's not like I even saw, the VHS tape that many times. Like
that goes back to that whole thing about music getting ingrained in your soul. But maybe talk to your brother-in-law. They because I did a bunch of research on those tables at one point to find out like how truly bad they were. They make diamond stylus upgrades for them.
Okay,
oh, they do.
That's good.
Yeah, because the one that's going to come out is like the cheap Chinese like ceramic one or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they make diamond styluses for those Crosley players
to protect those brand new records you got.
No, it's not going to protect the records. It's going to protect the vinyls.
I love the Divinyls.
The Divinyls.
I touch myself too. So, all right. I think that this is the real goodbye, I guess.
So hopefully everybody had a great Christmas or Kwanzaa or
Hanukkah happens this time of year,
or whatever holiday you're celebrating.
Or it's winter solstice if you're a Viking.
It's already passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and have a great New Year.
Have a great New Year. We're going to try to keep pumping these episodes out at a consistent schedule of about at least every 3 weeks. So next episode probably may not be until maybe after the New Year. I don't know. We'll see how things shake out. So, but we hope you have a good time with your family, whatever you're choosing to do to spend that,
or time away from your family if you're one of those.
That too.
I totally do not judge there. Actually, can I come?
Yeah. I also want to say I'm listening to this episode as we do it with headphones on, and I just want to make a commitment to our listeners that in the new year I'm gonna purchase a pop filter for Steve's microphone.
Am I hissing and spitting a lot?
It's just picking up those plosives real hard, but I bet you sound very rich and deep.
I hope so.
You're so close, but
I'm not very rich, and I guess I'm a little deep.
You're deep.
I'm definitely not rich.
You're deep when you drink. All right, guys, just remember there's always more vinyl.